Toiru, toiru agdoi Yishu, ischaneni.
So in this week's Parsha, we learn Parshas U'Akedah, the ultimate and the greatest of the 10 Nisyonis, Asura Nisyonis Shenesnasa Avraham Avinu. And the second part of today's shiur will talk a bit about Parshas U'Akedah, but we start the shiur with a halacha that Chazal learn from a posuk in Parshas U'Akedah. Vayashkem Avraham beboiker v'yarvosh et chamuro mekan zriזין מקדימין למצוות. So Chazal learn a halacha from this posuk. Avraham got up early in the morning and he prepared himself for this journey to Akedas Yitzchak, and Chazal learned from here that zriזין מקדימין למצוות. When you have a mitzvah to perform, don't postpone, don't schlep, don't take your time. Do it as soon as possible, as promptly as possible. זריזין מקדימין למצוות. And that is the first source on our sheet. Omer Rav Safra. Sliced Avraham Masher Chaislam. And Yom Shmini Yom V'Sara Losoi. Kol Yom Koshel Amilo. Ela Shezrizen Magdim Lemitzvah Shenemar. V'Yashkem Avraham B'Boiker V'Yachbosh Et Chamoro. The Bach, on the spot, Yumachov Ches, Gerses Abach, he brings Svarim Acherem. There's another version in this Gemara. We learn from V'Yashkem Avraham B'Boker, but another V'Yashkem Avraham B'Boker, because in this week's Parsha, there's another posuk, same words, V'Yashkem Avraham B'Boker, Ela Moker Masharom Et Sham. And that is when the three Malachim come to Avraham, and one of them goes to destroy Sdom, and Sdom is overturned and destroyed, V'Yashkem Avraham B'Boker, Ela Moker Masharom Et Sham. And he looks at where Sdom previously was, and all he sees is smoke and ashes. And the Bach quotes, and it's actually a psikta that we learn zriזין מקדימין from that V'Yashkem Avraham B'Boker. And the question is, what was the mitzvah? What was the mitzvah? How could we learn zriזין מקדימין mitzvahs? Brochas chavova mitbeis, tfilos keneged karbonos tiknum. Avraham tikkun shachris, Yitzchak mincha, Yankov arvis. And the Gemara says, how do we know that Avraham Avinu was the one that formulated Tfilas Ashachar? V'Yashkem Avraham B'Boiker Ela Mokom Asher Et Sham. So Chazal's understanding in V'Yashkem Avraham B'Boiker number 2, chronologically it's number 1, but it is actually number 2. It is another gersa. Avraham got up early in the morning to daven. As we learn in this parsha, Avraham plead with the Kodesh Baruch Hu to save Sdom. And it shows how much Avraham Avinu cared even for the most horrible people. They were bad people. And Avraham davened. And he brought a Kodesh Baruch Hu down from a price of 50 to 10. So Avraham Avinu was the ultimate negotiator. I don't think anybody ever negotiated the deal and he went down from $50,000 to $10,000 or from 50 shekel to 10 shekel. Avraham Avinu wasn't a negotiator. Rachamim. He was a tzaddik. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Molei Rachamim. Yes. So Avraham Avinu Kivyochel brought down HaKadosh Baruch Hu from 50 to 10. And then there were not even 10 tzaddikim. And Sdom is lost. But Avraham knows he could no longer plead, but he could still daven. He could no longer plead, but he could still daven. So V'Yashkem Avraham B'Boiker Ela Mokom Et Sham. Avraham Avinu davened, and it is from here that we learn zriזין מקדימין למצוות. Source number 3. And interesting, all the sources of this week's parsha. Psikta and other psikta. V'yamayir Avraham ha'oel el Soro, kol kvod u'zmelech penuma. Ha'oelo. V'yomer mari shor esom, zores u'mezares b'mitzvahs. He is zores. He runs to the tent. He is mezares. He tells Sora, fast. Mahari. Shor esom. So Avraham Avinu was zoriz umezariz b'mitzvahs. Source number 4. And we're still in this week's parsha, which is interesting. How do we know that a father has the chiyuv to be mal his son, to do bris milah of his son? Vayomer Avraham Yitzchak v'noi ben shmoines yomim kasher tzivu Yisrael Elokim, and the Gemara says, ledoris menayin, ein tzav elo ziruz. Rashi writes, ziruz sheyei moyer v'zorez b'dovar v'noig miad v'noig ledoris. So when Avraham Avinu comes to be mal Yitzchak, kasher tzivu Yisrael shezorez umoyer b'mitzvahs. What is Hiddur Mitzvah all about? What lies underneath the surface? What is Hiddur Mitzvah all about? So we have 4 sources in this week's parsha. The Meiri explains, Kishetov dvar mitzvah liyodoi, shehem echlal zriizin מקדימין למצווה, ולא יתאחר בעשיית המצווה, שאין זה לדרך מי שאינו עושה מצווה דרך כוונה ועולה, אלא כמי שעושה דרך פירוק כל ומצווה מלמדו. If you have no passion for mitzvahs, and you're just doing it as a core, you know, it's a tercha, then you don't really rush to do it. But if you love your mitzvahs, and you remember the Rambam at the end of Hilchas Lulav, Hasimche sheyismacha odam b'asiyas mitzvahs, avoide gedolehi, then you're going to rush. So if you ask a little boy or a little girl, I have an ice cream cone for you. Do you want it now or in another 3 hours? You know what the answer will be. Do you want your ice cream today or tomorrow? And your kid will say, not today, not tomorrow, now. And you tell your kid, we need to go to the dentist. Do you want today or tomorrow? You know what the answer will be. Always. Every kid. Tomorrow. And that is these madimah mitzvahs. When you appreciate what a mitzvah is, what it means to you, and you love your mitzvahs, that is these madimah mitzvahs. It is a reflection of your passion for mitzvahs. What are you feeling? Are you doing this just because everybody does it, so I do it as well? And sometimes you're going to do a mitzvah because you believe in Schar V'Onish and you don't want to sit in Gehenna with all the Rishonim, then there's no rush. But if you love your mitzvahs and you appreciate what a mitzvah means to you, then that is Zis Madim Ala Mitzvahs. There's another concept in Chazal, source number 7. Shiur mitzvahs lo mashinan. Mitzvah begodel yabim. That is a Mishnah in Yevomis. Lo yirotze malchan el kolowachim. So when a person dies without children, there's a mitzvah of yibum. We turn to his brothers. Do you want to marry the wife of the deceased? If he doesn't want to or she doesn't want to, then the other option is chalitza. So what happens? The oldest brother is not around. He's in America. He's in Chutz La'aretz. Do we wait for him to come back? The Mishnah says no. If he's not around, we go to number 2. And what happens if the older brother doesn't want to do Yibum, but he says, I'll do Chalitza, but Yibum comes for Chalitza, and there's a younger brother, he's 5 years old. Do we wait? He should become a Godel, and then he might do Yibum? We don't wait. Do the mitzvah now. And the Gemara explains shiur mitzvahs lo mashinan, and you don't postpone, you don't push off mitzvahs. What is the difference between these makdimin mitzvahs and shiur mitzvahs lo mashinan? Who says there's a difference? There must be a difference, because different words convey a different message. Different words are different concepts. And if we find 2 agdoras in Chazal, these makdimin mitzvahs, shiur mitzvahs lo mashinan, they cannot mean the same. Even more than that. Zis Madim Ala Mitzvahs. What is the halacha? Mila. Kol yom hashmini kosher Mila. Ela shezis Madim Ala Mitzvahs. What is the halacha of shiur mitzvahs lo mashinan? Yibum. Why don't Chazal shiur mitzvahs lo mashinan by Mila? or by Yibum says these are makdimin mitzvahs. There's one more Gemara about shiur mitzvahs lo mashinan, and that is source number 8. In the process of conversion, a ger comes to be megaya. There are 3 stages when a ger wants to lachsois tachas kanfei hashchino. Stage number 1, the Beis Din interviews him, and they need to be convinced that he means it, that he is sincere. He wants to be a Jew. He's willing to take upon himself tar yag mitzvahs with no exception. We try to push him away. That is the halacha. But once Beis Din is convinced that he means it, malen oisoi miyad. Last line. Kibel. When the ger is makabel alatzmai oil mitzvahs, malen oisoi miyad. My tami. What's the rush? Shiur mitzvahs lo mashinan. So once again, the Gemara doesn't say this is makdimin, but rather shiur mitzvahs lo mashinan. So my feeling is this. As I said before, zriizin makdimin mitzvahs is a reflection of chibuv mitzvah, of loving your mitzvahs. And that is why this halacha, Chazal say in a positive context. What you should do, shiur mitzvahs lo mashinan, is in a negative connotation. What you should not do. Not what you should do, but what you should not do. Don't postpone. Don't push it off. Don't wait. Lanias daiti shiur mitzvahs lo mashinan is not a reflection of chibuv mitzvah. By yibum and chalitza, those are not mitzvahs that are essentially avodas ukeil. You just need to free this woman. She should be able to get married. Either she marries you or let her marry someone else. And therefore, zriizin makdimin mitzvahs wouldn't apply. Shiur mitzvahs lo mashinan is when, if you're not going to do it now, maybe you're going to lose out entirely. It is either now or never. So there's an older brother in Medina Sayyam, and in days of yore, you didn't have a ticket and get on a flight and you're home. Once again, these are times when you want to come to Eretz Yisrael. It's not so easy to get on a flight and you come back home. It's almost as hard as it was when there were camel caravans in the desert. So we don't wait for the older brother to come in Medina Sayyam. It might take months, and who knows? The younger ones that are here might go away, and he might never come back. So don't push it off. You might lose out. And the same is with a ger. Once Beis Din is convinced that the ger is sincere, it's a mitzvah gedolah lekabloi. We push him off until we are convinced that he really wants to be mekabel ol malchus shamayim, and he wants to be part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's mishpocha. But once we are convinced that he means it, don't push him off. Every ger is in extreme pressure. Every ger is mekayim what HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Avraham Avinu, lech lecho ma'artzecho, memoladetecho umebeis avicho. There's a family surrounding him and friends and a social circle. Don't push it off because we might lose him. And he might be intimidated, he might be afraid, he might turn back. And if he means it, then we want him. That means he has the Yiddish neshama. So shiur mitzvahs lo mashinan is not a positive idea like zriizin makdimin, which is chibuv mitzvah. Shiur mitzvahs lo mashinan is don't push it off. So if the older brother was invited to do chalitza, and he calls and he says, there's an accident on Kvish Mispar Achad. According to Wייס, it's going to take me 2 hours to get there. We don't go to his younger brother and say, you give chalitza. We patiently wait. He's on his way here. He's not flying anywhere. Lemisa loy chayshinan. Won't die, and if he does die, the younger brother is still here. So shiur mitzvahs lo mashinan is not like zriizin makdimin. Zriizin makdimin, every minute counts. You don't push off a mitzvah with a half hour. Do it now. If you love your mitzvahs, what are you waiting for? Shiur mitzvahs lo mashinan, when the Rambam brings this halacha, he writes, Hoyu ha'ach hagadol b'medina acheres. in a different Medina. He was on his way here, but he had a flat tire. We patiently wait. It's not like zizin makdimin mitzvahs. Trumas Adeshem Lamedei, quoted in the Ramos Tov Chavav. So who knows why we usually do Kiddush Levon on Motzei Shabbos? Who knows? Why do we do Kiddush Levon on Motzei Shabbos? Does anybody know? What? I don't hear that well. Mevusam. It's an interesting din. What does that mean, mevusam? In modern language, bosom is perfume. So Motzei Shabbos, you're perfumed. So Shulchan Aruch says everybody's mevusam in Big Day Shabbos. Probably a reflection of covet for the mitzvah, of simchas ha-mitzvah. So lechatchila we do it Motzei Shabbos. But if the levona is visible in the middle of the week, do we need to wait for Motzei Shabbos? Thomas Adeshan says depends. If it's summer, especially summer in Eretz Yisrael, it's not cloudy, it's not rainy in the middle of the summer, then you wait for Motzei Shabbos. Even though zizin makdimin mitzvahs, Motzei Shabbos overrides zrizin makdimin mitzvahs. Zrizin makdimin mitzvahs is an important principle. But there's a huge discussion in the Poskim when Hiddur mitzvah goes against zrizin makdimin. We need to weigh which is more important. So Motzei Shabbos, mivusam, the Big Day Shabbos, comes before zrizin. But if it's winter time, and if you wait for Motzei Shabbos, it might be rainy, it might be cloudy, you might not be able to do Kiddush Levona, and the clock is ticking, and in another day or two you could no longer do Kiddush Levona. Thomas Adeshan says, we don't wait, because shiur mitzvahs lo mashinan. So in this very same halacha, the Thomas Adeshan deals with two concepts. Zrizin makdimin in the summer, shiur mitzvahs lo mashinan in the winter. And according to the way we explain these halachas, it is beautiful and so logical. In the summer, you're not taking a risk. You could do it Motzei Shabbos. Zrizin makdimin? No, Motzei Shabbos is more important than Zrizin makdimin. But in the winter, you're taking a risk. You might lose the mitzvah entirely. If you don't do it now, nobody could promise you that Motzei Shabbos there will be a levana. And therefore, we don't wait for Motzei Shabbos, because shiur mitzvahs lo mashinan. Where else do we find zrizin makdimin mitzvahs? Source number 10, and that is a halacha. When a person is yotzei derech, he can daven after a lois, and he doesn't need to wait for the nates. So we won't go into all the details of this complicated halacha, but let's look at the second paragraph. ומכל מקום כדי לקיים מצווה מן המובחר, נוכנו שימתין עד שיגיע למחוז חפצה לספל שם מעומד, אם ידוע לו שיהיה לו שם מקום מיוחד, שלא יבלבלו בני הבייס. שלא יבלבלו בני הבייס. So you could daven sitting on your mule or on your camel, or sitting in a car. You can't stand up by shmoines if you're in a car. So, however, if when you're going to reach your destination, you know you'll have a quiet place and you can daven ba'amida, then wait. But once you reach your destination and your host has 10 little kids and a small apartment, and yebalbeluhu b'nei abayis, then it's better to daven sitting on a horse, on a mule, in a car, not ba'amida, to have proper kavanah. But if you will be able to daven with kavanah when you reach your destination, wait. Ve'ein bezeh mishum ein machmitzen es ha-mitzvah zu zviz v'endim le'mitzvah kiven shemeschaven kedei lakayim mitzvah min ha-muvchar. This is another example in which mitzvah min ha-muvchar overrides zriz. So zrizin makdimin mitzvah is an important principle, but not always is it the most important factor. Tefillah b'kavanah comes before zrizin. So if you're riding or driving on the way to your city, and you have two options. You could daven right now seated, or wait till you arrive, and you could daven b'amida. And b'kavanah, wait. Zrizin Madimim LaMitzvahs. But Mitzvah and Amufah comes before Zrizin. Just like Motzei Shabbos comes before Zrizin Madimim LaMitzvahs by Kiddush Levana. Concept number 3. Omer Reb Shimon, Boi v'ra'ei, kama chaviv mitzvah b'shato sharei hekta chalovim v'evim kshem kol laila, lo haya mamtin la ad shetecheshach. This Gemara is a Menuchas Ayin Beis and a Psochim Samach Ches. The Gemara says, Kama chaviv mitzvah b'shato. Kol ben tzibur doichen Shabbos. And who knows what are the Arba Avodas Adam, Arba Avodas Amatio? What are the 4 Avodas in every korban that we bring to the Beis Hamikdash? Does anybody know? What are the 4 fundamental Avodas? Shchita, Kabbalas Adam, Halacha, Zrika. These are the 4 Avodas. We shech the animal, we take its blood into a kli, we walk to the Mizbeach, and a Zor Zerech. And then, what do we do with the rest of the animal, besides the blood? Haktorah al gabe ha-Mizbeach. Haktorah kosher kol halayla. Doesn't need to be b'yoyim. However, if you have time, we do Haktorah b'yoyim, even though it involves Chilul Shabbos. It is burning part of the animal on the Mizbeach. Mavir is a malacha. So the Gemara says, Kama chaviv mitzvah b'shato. We don't wait till night, even though if we wait till night, we avoid Chilul Shabbos. And it's kosher, but we don't wait. Why? Chaviv mitzvah b'shato. What is the difference between chaviv mitzvah b'shato and zriz madimim mitzvahs? Obviously, we understand chaviv mitzvah b'shato has nothing to do with shiur mitzvahs lo mashinan, because the Mizbeach is here, the Kohen is here, the Eivarim are here. We're not taking any risk. No reason to be afraid we might lose the mitzvah. You're not going to lose anything. But what is the difference between zriz madimim mitzvahs and chaviv mitzvah b'shato? Once again, we need to be medaktik loshen chazal. Chaviv mitzvah b'shato. What does b'shato mean? We're mechalal Shabbos because chaviv mitzvah b'shato. We never would be mechalal Shabbos for zrizin makdimin mitzvahs. Zrizin makdimin mitzvahs is not doicha Shabbos. Chaviv mitzvah b'shato is. Chaviv mitzvah b'shato stresses the word b'shato. There are mitzvahs in which there is lechatchila zman and a zman of b'di'evet. Lechatchila, aktura should be performed by day, because ein korbanos, ein avodas akorbanos belayla. All the avodas akorbanos are by day. Shchita, kabbalah, halacha, zrika are posel belayla. Haktura is an exception. Kosher kol halayla. But that is only a b'di'evet. Because sometimes there were so many korbanos, especially b'chagim and sukkahs, that they didn't have time to do all the Akdora by day. So Akdora is ksheira kol halayla. Sometimes there's omes. People came from near and from far, and many korbanos were, and Adora many davos. So Akdora is kosher kol halayla, but it's a b'di'evet. Chaviv mitzvah b'shato. It is important to be mekayim mitzvah beikar hazman, in the zman that is lechatchila, and that is why it's doicha Shabbos. So this is different than zrizin makdimin lemitzvahs. Finally, concept number 4, ein mavirin ala mitzvahs. What is the difference between ein mavirin ala mitzvahs and zrizin chaviv mitzvah b'shato? Ein mavirin ala mitzvahs has many sources. On our sheet, we only have one. Megillat Avava Midbeis, when there's a leap year, and we have 2 Chadoshim of Adar, in which do we observe Purim? Adar Rishon or Adar Sheni? Well, everybody knows Odar Sheni. But in the Gemara, it's a machlokes Rabbi Elazar ben Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Rabbi Elazar ben Rabbi Yossi says, no, all the mitzvahs should be performed Adar Rishon. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, Adar Sheni. What is the reasoning? Rabbi Elazar ben Rabbi Yossi says, Ein Mavin al mitzvahs. How could you skip? How could you skip? Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, Mismach geula legeula odif. We want to juxtapose. We want to make Purim as close to Pesach as possible, because both Purim and both Pesach, we remember miracles, Nisim. These are Lamala Mederach HaTeva, these are Bederach HaTeva, but they're miracles. And therefore we want Purim and Pesach to come close to each other. Rabbi Elazar ben Rabbi Yossi says, Ein Mavin al mitzvahs. Do you know why Tefillin Shel Yad comes before Tefillin Shel Rosh? Why does Tefillin Shel Yad come before Tefillin Shel Rosh? And why wouldn't the halacha say, what's the difference? This is tefillin, that's tefillin, whatever you want. No. Tefillin Shel comes before Tefillin Shel Rosh. Why? Who knows? Two reasons. One is, Chazal say, V'hoyo l'toitofos bein einecho, kol zman shebein einecho yu shnayim. We never have Shel Rosh without Shel Yad. And that is why when we put on the tefillin, we put on Shel Yad, then Shel Rosh. When we take off the tefillin, we take off the Shel Rosh, and then Shel Yad. But that is not ma'akev. Tefillin Shel Yad and Tefillin Shel Yad are two different mitzvahs. And if a person only has Shel Yad, he puts on Shel Yad without Shel Rosh, and he puts on Shel Rosh without Shel Yad. Why does Shel Yad come earlier? As I said, v'hoyle tetoves. Another reason is Ein Mavin al mitzvahs. Because when you lift up your arm, first you pass your left arm before you reach your head. Ein Mavin al mitzvahs. And that is why in Menachos Lamed Vav we learn when you take off your tefillin and you put them into the tefillin, whatever it's called, tefillin bag, I don't know, then we usually have wide ones, but in the days of Chadal there was a very narrow one. Put in Shel Rosh first and then Shel Yad. Because tomorrow morning, if you take out the Shel Rosh first, you're going to need to put it aside and then take out Shel Yad. Ein Mavin al mitzvahs. So when you put your tefillin into the bag, you need to see to it that tomorrow morning when you take out your tefillin, tefillin Shel Yad comes out first. Because we don't want to skip a mitzvah. So Ein Mavin al mitzvahs is you don't skip. And one of the halachas is Oder Rishon Oder Sheni. How could you, Rabbi Elazar ben Rabbi Yossi says, how could you skip Yud Daled Odor and Tezvav Odor and not read the Megillah? Ein Mavin al mitzvahs. So Ein Mavin al mitzvahs we find in many different ways. You don't skip one mitzvah to perform another. And that is Tefillin Shel Yad, Tefillin Shel Rosh. By Megillah, it's the same mitzvah. You don't skip your first opportunity and then wait for another opportunity. That is not like zrisin makdimin. Once again, zrisin makdimin is a positive concept. What you should do. Ein Mavin al mitzvahs is what you should not do. So if zrisin makdimin is a reflection of chibuv mitzvah, Ein Mavin is a reflection of bizui mitzvah. You cannot be mevazah mitzvahs. And that is why Ein Mavin al mitzvahs. So he spoke about 4 different concepts and tried to explain each of them. And this week, we learn Akedas Yitzchak. And many ask, what was the great Nisayon of Akedas Yitzchak? Avraham Avinu was willing to sacrifice his life in Ur Kasdim. He was willing to sacrifice his son's life. And that is a Gavaldige Nisayon. In our painful history, many stood in the same Nisayon. 900 years ago, in the Crusades, when Christians forced Jews to convert, and many were Moshe Nefesh, and there was a big machlokes between Balei HaTosfos. What do we do with the children? Because the Christians snatched away children. They took away Jewish children. Many times they murdered their parents. And it was very easy with little kids, bringing them up as Christians. Rabbeinu Ephraim and some other Balataisa said, we need to kill the children. They should not be Oved Avodah Zarah. We cannot let them fall into our enemies' hands. And Rabbeinu Tam was adamantly opposed to this opinion. And he says, you do not kill your children. You daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it's up to him. And Rabbeinu Tam was so angry that he told the posik that said, you need to kill the children, that he said, if you're going to go ahead with your plan, Chas v'sholem, you're going to have a misa mishina v'kach havi. And this story is brought in 3 different sources. Ritvo Avodah Zarah Daf Yudches, Da Zekenim Lebali Toises Parshas Noach, and the Beis Yosef and Bedek Abayis, and Yoredeya, I think it's Kuf Nun Zayin. Do we have a tour in this room, or we need to go elsewhere? If we have a tour, Yoredeya, Kuf Nun Zayin. I just want to check it. It's either Kuf Nun Vav or Kuf Nun Zayin. So, one of the Gedolim in those days went ahead with his plan. Children were destroyed, and then he had a very tragic end. But they all meant L'Shem Shemayim. And those that did such a horrific act also meant L'Shem Shemayim. In a way, it was an asoyan like a Kedes Yitzchak. So what was so special and so gewaldig about Avraham Avinu, and what was the nature of his Nesoyin? Yes, it is in Bedek Habayis, Simen Kuf Nun Zayin. Bedek Habayis is additions that the Beis Yosef wrote to his Sefer Beis Yosef towards the end of his lifetime. So what ultimately was the Nesoyin of Avraham Avinu? So my feeling is this. Avraham Avinu was the greatest Ohev Hashem. And that is what the Rambam writes in Perek Yud of Hilchos Tshuva. The Rambam dedicated an entire Perek Yud in Hilchos Tshuva, to Ahavas Hashem. And the Rambam writes, Loi kol hachachomim zochu, to the Madrega of Ahavas Hashem. That is the Madrega of Avraham Avinu. The Novi Yeshayahu, referring to Klal Yisrael, says, Zera Avraham Ohavi. Avraham was the greatest of Hashem. But Shleimus in Avodas Hashem is Dechilu and Rechimu. Ahavu plus Yira. So you probably remember in Masechet Kedushin Daf Lamed Hey, Machloikes, when are we called Bonim Lamokim and when are we called Avodim Lamokim? Rameir and Rabbi Yehuda. The Zohar Kodesh in Parshas Bahar says we are always Bonim and we are always Avodim. And Bonim and Avodim don't contradict each other. They're mashlim one another. We love HaKadosh Baruch Hu because we're Bonim. We're in awe and fear of HaKadosh Baruch Hu because we're Avodim. And there is no stila. We are always Bonim, and we are always Avodim. Avo and Yiro are the 2 pillars of Dveikus and Yiddishkeit. What is the difference between a servant, a slave, and a child? When a father asks the son to do something, the son feels free to ask, Abba, why? Could you explain to me, why is this important? Why do you want me to do this? And the father doesn't get angry. He's my son, he deserves to know, he wants to learn. A slave is not supposed to ask questions. You do your duty. Anybody here from London? Anybody visit Trafalgar Square? There's a big column and a man standing up on the top and he misses a leg. Do you know who that was? A one-legged person up there on the column in the middle of London. That's Horatio Nelson. He was a British naval commander, lost a leg. And his famous line was, when he spoke to his troops, ours is not to ask why. Ours is to do and die. And Eved doesn't ask questions. You ask a question, you get a slap in the face. You have a duty to do, work. But a son is entitled to understand. Kadosh Baruch Hu tells Avraham Avinu, take your son and slaughter him and kill him. And Avraham has 1,000 questions. Didn't you promise me that? What now? And Avraham Avinu teaches the whole world Amunas HaYichud, and he fights Avodah Zorah. And Oivdei Avodah Zorah had a avoid of Moilach. Moilach is killing your kid and sacrificing him to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Avraham Avinu dedicated his life to destroy Avodah Zorah. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Avraham Avinu thinks to himself, what am I going to do now? My entire life project is being totally destroyed. The world will laugh at me. You did the same as we do. You killed your son as a sacrifice to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But Avraham Avinu asks no questions. This is my mitzvah. The Nesoyan was, Ha'im goydel o ahavo doichik es raglei ha'yira. Is the Yiras Hashem of Avraham Avinu as great as Avas Hashem? That was the test. He asks no questions. V'yelchu shneim yachdav. And that is why the Malach turns to Avraham Avinu. And what does he say? Ato yodati ki yarei Elokim ato. We knew that you're Oyev Hashem. Nobody doubted that. This test was to test your Yiras Hashem. Is your Yira as great as your Ahavo? And do you understand when to exercise Avo and when to exercise Yiro? So Avraham Avinu is told to kill his son, which he thinks to himself, this cannot be. This cannot be. You know, I've been fighting Avodah Zorah, and I've been teaching the entire world that HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want Korbanos Odom, like the Gemara says in Megillah Daf Daled, that this is an Aveira. Why don't you ask? A son is entitled to ask. Avraham Avinu says, I'm an Eved as well as a son, and now I cannot ask. And Chazal say, the moment the Malach says, Al tishlach yad cholenar, Avraham takes a deep breath and he says, Achshav afarish sichosi. Okay, if I don't have to kill my son, now I have some questions. And he goes all the way back and he says, מתחיל אמרת לו כי ויצחק כל החזורה. אחר כך אמרתי לילד שם לידו, ועכשיו אתה אומר לי אל תשלח את כל הנער. But as long as he has a mitzvah to perform, he asks no questions. And that was the Nesoyan of Yira, and that's why the Malach says, Ato yodati ki yarei Elokim ato. And that is the shleimus of Avodas Hashem, the combination of the chilu and rechimu, of ahava and Yira. For some people, Yiro is easier than Avo. For others, Avo is easier than Yiro. Avo is definitely more pleasant than Yiro. But the shleimus is always the chilu and rechimu, Avo and Yiro. We should all be zoicha to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'seim b'libeinu ahavoscho v'yiroscho lasois retzoncho b'leivav sholem. We should all be zoicha to Av and Yiro. And we should only hear Besodes Toivos, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu should send us Mashiach Tzedkeinu b'mheru v'yomeinu. Amen.